Hello everyone, this is Michal Lisewski from Merrick Studio. It's 3 p.m. in Europe, 2 p.m. in London, and 9 a.m. US East Coast. Today with us we have a special guest, Robin Zondag of Sundai company. Robin, if you could introduce yourself, tell a few words about what you're doing, what the company is doing.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me in your LinkedIn live show. So it's good to be part of it. My name is Robin Zondag. Robin outside of the Netherlands, which I think by all these different time zones probably is outside of the Netherlands. I'm the owner and founder of Digital Sundai, which is a consultancy, a startup consultancy focused on improving business by applying advanced analytics. So it's the combination of improving something in your organization, whether it's customer care, marketing, manufacturing, by applying advanced analytics.
Okay, thank you very much for this. What kind of analytics do you offer? Like to give us a little bit of helicopter perspective for the beginning.
Yeah, so basically we offer free services at Digital Sundai. So the first service is really identifying what your organization needs. So if you would, for instance, an analytics strategy or a roadmap, so I want to be better at customer service, and how do I do this with analytics? That's what we work with customers. And this is a combination, of course, of what business goals are available and what's possible with your data, your technology or our technology, and data science. So this is a combination of those. And then we shape either a roadmap to get there, or we work with you on a specific use case where we identify the use case, both in terms of a business case, business result, and in terms of analytics. And then the next step, the next service we offer is we build that analytics, and then get to your question, what kind of analytics do you offer? And basically the full range. So sometimes we need deep learning, machine learning to get it done, text analytics, vision analytics, to achieve our goal. But also sometimes it's just a plain dashboard in Power BI, Tableau is already doing the trick. And sometimes it's somewhere in between with some data science, Python scripts that we need to develop to make that happen. And of course, it needs to maintain and land on your tech infrastructure. And this is where we work with ML engineering, ML ops to make sure that this beautiful predictive model is also working next year and not just in the POC that we've been involved in. And the last service we're providing is helping companies, organizations to improve their capability to apply data science. So, and that could be a broad range of things, from training people on how to use and how to work with data analytics, towards building up a piece of tech, or getting external data sources, or sorting out your data sources, or developing your capabilities to work with machine learning, deep learning, and what have you.
Okay, thank you very much for this. I read your white paper on the project. Please excuse me, my Dutch isn't that good. Wereldhaven.
It happens. Yes, the Dutch people would say Wereldhaven, but you're close.
Wereldhaven. All right. Yes, and I read this paper. Very interesting one. Worth of downloading. If some of our people from our audience would be interested. You mentioned over there a few very important topics, including analytics strategy. If you could put a little bit of light, what stands behind analytics strategy, what factors you take into consideration, how you evaluate it.
Yeah, so what we think when we talk about analytics strategy, we take the broad definition, because you could use analytics strategy just focusing on your analytics capability, and then you talk about what kind of technology do I need, what kind of competences do I need, what kind of data do I need to move to the cloud, and which cloud and what cloud services should I be using? So that's really the supply side. You haven't built anything of value yet for an organization. What if we do an analytics strategy? We typically take the broad range where we say, okay, this is a company like Wereldhaven is a company that owns shopping malls, around 30 shopping malls in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in France, and they had a business strategy to make money and create value for their shareholders and the people that work for the company. So what we did is try to understand that business strategy and then figure out what analytics could add to that business strategy first. So really focus on where can we add value. And then the next question comes along, okay, if we know that, for instance, in understanding customers and consumers better, or tenants better, or catchment areas, so the area where people live that go to shopping malls, if we have better understanding or more insights, or better able to predict what kind of marketing campaign would work and wouldn't work with a certain consumer, then the next phase comes along and say, how are we going to make this? Because it's nice to know that we want a flying car, but if you can't make it, there is not so much value in having that insight that people would like to have a value and a flying car when they're stuck in a traffic jam. So so when you know what is the area where you want to create value, then the next step comes about, okay, how are we going to do it? And is this possible? What capabilities do we need? What kind of data do we need? What kind of skills do we need? What kind of technology do we need in our organization? What kind of effort is required to make this happen? And does it still fit the time frame that's available, the resources that are available, all of the other things that the company also needs to do? Can we do those? And then we try to optimize and say, okay, if this is your business strategy, then we think we can contribute with analytics in this domain, and this should be achievable in the coming months. And we start with this project. At least our advice would be, you should start with this project, and we can help with realizing that project. So the analytics strategy for us is really defined in terms of business value, and then solidly anchored in what's possible in terms of technology, data, and other resources that you need to make that happen.
Okay, thank you very much for this. I must have a very comprehensive answer. By taking this chance, I would like to encourage our audience to ask questions, whether you're watching our show on YouTube as well as LinkedIn. You can ask your question via comment section. We will read it and get back to our guest. Meanwhile, I wanted to ask a question which may sound quite obvious, but I think it's worth of, let's say, exploration. What's the main purpose of gathering data in shopping spaces? Why people do that, and how businesses can benefit from data from shopping spaces? Because Deliverables is a network of shopping malls.
Yes. Yeah, I think what was really interesting with Deliverables is that they were changing their strategy, because owning shopping malls has been a money machine for many, many, many years, and things have changed the last 10 years in this area for all of these shopping malls. This is not something specific to Deliverables. All shopping mall owners in the Western world are confronted with the fact that people are using the internet to buy things, and there is less need of square meters shopping malls. So in order to make money of your shopping mall, they need to do things differently. And Deliverables had two main anchors in their strategy. One is to transform a part of the shopping mall into, well, there's a shortage in housing in Western European countries at the moment. So make a house of your square meter and ask for rent. But also, what they designed is a full service center, which is having loads of different, like doctors, like gyms, to make sure the footfall into the shopping center is still good, because there are daily activities for people, a good reason to go there, but are different from retailers. So that was one. The other aspect was, traditionally, most shopping mall owners behave like real estate agents. So they sell square meters, air conditioning, inventory, stocks, and things like that. But in fact, a shopping mall you could also consider as a department store, but then with independent tenants. And if you look at it in that way, and you try to maximize the revenue that's generated by that department store, then you need to act like a retailer. And that is a transformation, that's a business transformation for shopping mall owners, but definitely also a transformation where data plays a key role. Because if you're selling real estate, you need to know less about what your consumer and shopping behaviors are than when you think of yourself as a sort of category manager with different tenants in a retail setting, because then you really want to know, okay, who's coming when to my shopping mall, what are their motives, what are their desires, how can I position my shopping mall to convince people in the catchment area with a certain proposition that comes to me. Who should I show which proposition? Like any digital marketer would think about showing things. So all of a sudden, you need to know much more about motives of your consumers. You need to think about and have an understanding which tenants or categories basically they come in the retail, which tenants do fit well together. And for instance, if I put a coffee shop next to the supermarket, is this generating more money for all of the shopping mall, or should I put the coffee shop like 3-4 shops further away, so I have more traffic for maybe shops where people do not stop, and now they look at the inside the shop and think, hey, I'm going to buy something. And by optimizing, let's say, the tenant mix, and by understanding that tenant mix, which is a lot of data, it's combining spending behavior by seeing how does that relate and how can we optimize it. McKinsey was estimating you could generate an additional 20% of revenue in the shopping mall. So therefore, it's really important if that's your strategy, to understand much better the drivers and who your consumers are, much better who your tenants are, how the performance is, and how they interact together, and what the optimal tenant mix is. You need to understand also much better who is living in the neighborhood of your shopping mall and maybe not yet visiting, and would be a perfect match with your services. So how do you convince them? And of course, you would need to understand the retail competition in the area also much better, so you can optimize your choices for the situation that your shopping mall is, because it's hard to move a shopping mall. So you'll be bound there, and that's what I think where the data collection is also different. If you have that strategy as a shopping mall owner, then you are much more into the, let's say, more classical retail real estate game, where you just make sure you do an inventory of the potential for the shopping mall maybe once, and you rebuild and make sure it's clean and there's a good parking space and so on. But you're not that actively focusing on how to increase revenue for all of your tenants in your shopping mall.
Right. Thank you very much for this. I'm living in a city where my first impression is that there are too many shopping malls, to be honest.
Most cities have that issue right now. So imagine what it is like if you're the owner of a shopping mall and still want to make some money.
Yes, the competition is strong.
Yes.
So getting back to your white paper, I keep in mind that you've been describing, let's say, design thinking workshop process, which is, I think, slightly different than, for example, in our industry, because when we are doing workshops, we are, let's say, trying to understand the business model of a startup. We are trying to understand who are, let's say, the potential groups of users. We are doing some dashboards using Figma and Vision. How does it look like in the AI industry? What is the purpose of doing design thinking workshops? How you start this process? What kind of data do you collect? How you use it later on?
Yeah. I think a good question, and I think the answer is surprisingly similar to a large extent. So if you think of data services as data products, which give you a certain insight or an autonomous decision on things, or whatever you want to do with the data product, that depends, of course, on your business objective. Then if you look at let's say the process we run with Wereldhaven, building the overall analytical strategy, I think that is a different kind of workshops and a different kind of style. But once you've identified that you need use cases in understanding your consumers, or persuading your consumers to come to an event or to do some shopping or spend more money, and use some insight, generate insights that make that possible, that's where you get to a quite traditional design sprint, like Google is using. I don't know which methodology you use. There's plenty around, but same kind of like problem statements, starting to think about it. How might we, and things like that. I think those are quite similar. What we've added to because AI is specific variation of it, I would say. And there's two things I think that are different. One is a lot of people still struggle to really comprehend what AI can do and what it can't do. So quite often there's a little bit, let's call it, not, this is not for everyone, but on an average audience, some sort of education. So what is definitely possible and what's definitely not possible, because sometimes the expectations are like AI is magic, which is not true. Or can't work for us, it's for Google or Facebook, which is also not true. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. And to help people, because they need to think creatively in your design workshop, to give them an understanding on what can be done and what can't be done a little bit better. So there's some sort of examples. What do other people in your industry do with AI? What is difficult for AI? What's easy for AI? And how could that maybe help and start the creative process? So that's one thing. And the other thing we try to do is show, not tell. So we try to understand what roughly the business problem is that we're going to be discussing about, and then collect data up front that's related to it, and show just the first attempt, the first step, but have some data scientists already work on the preferably customer data and show some insights that are possible that we just worked on a little bit in preparing the workshop. Typically, you wouldn't do that, I think, in a design thinking workshop for other more like software related or internet services. So those are the two things. So some educational, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page on what's possible and what's not possible with AI on a high level. And the other one is to use real data and get real insights, just to open up minds and say, okay, this can be done with our data. And okay, it's not perfect yet, but if we could tweak it like this, then hey, that could be really interesting for my department. So that's what we add to it.
All right. Thank you very much for this. Once again, I would like to encourage our audience, if any questions would come up from LinkedIn people, YouTube people, please feel free to ask your questions via the comment section. Okay, I would like to come back again to how we do things and let's say compare them a little bit to how people from your, let's say, branch are doing things. Yeah, because when we are, for example, delegating a team, it is like a full stack team. There are front-end developers, back-end developers, quality assurance, sometimes product design, Scrum Masters, and so on. What kind of competencies are needed to perform such analytical process? And what's, let's say, typical team composition? Yeah, like what kind of specialists are basically offering services as yours?
Yeah, typically, I think, but that might be the same with you. But we have a mixed team with the customer. Mm-hmm. So typically, you need really good business understanding and good understanding of the technology of the customer. Where's the data? How can it be accessed, and so on. So typically, we would build an agile team. So the Scrum Master will also be there. With some experts, either technical experts that know the IT environment very well from the customer and know where to find the data, how to access it properly, and so on, and what kind of security measures to respect. And then on the other end, we typically also involve and have as part of the team, not always full time, but some business subject matter experts, which are quite often also coming from the customer. So somebody really knows how to do marketing for shopping malls, or somebody that has been selling to tenants for years, so really understand that sales process very well. So that's one part. Then there typically is something we would call an analytics translator. So somebody that is a good business consultant in essence, but understands the requirements, can work with requirements and translate them into proper technical requirements. So it can really be a bridge between, let's say, the data science people we would have and the data engineers that work on the technology. So the team is typically having both business people and good technologists in the team. And then you'll find, depending a little bit on what needs to be done, a data scientist, or maybe if there's more dashboarding to be done, a BI expert like Power BI or Tableau that really knows the way. Then we'll have somebody that takes care of the big data flows and backends of data, which is more a data engineer. some cases an ML engineer to get that part going. And that's typically the team. And sometimes we need to program something because we have APIs, or we have this beautiful insight and it needs to be connected to Salesforce, or it needs to be integrated with an ERP system where people work that need that advice. So then we would get to your backend developers, and sometimes it needs to be integrated into a nice front end, and then we'll get to your front end developers. So there is, depending on what needs to be done, I think that you typically see different, but you always have a data scientist in the team, and I think always as well an analytics translator and a scrum master. Those are sort of the starting points, and then we build the team building depending on the typical situation.
Okay, thank you very much for this. What kind of technologies are used in that kind of project? Are you using any hardware, for example, to perform your tasks with programming languages?
Yeah, so as well, there's a wide variety, and it changes quite fast. So and we go with the customer. What you see is more and more, we don't need any hardware because most of the stuff happens in the cloud.
Right.
So it's really either GCP or Azure or AWS where these projects happen, and depending on, let's say, the analytical platform that's chosen by a customer, because typically that's a given. Sometimes we have to build it. So you'd be working in things like Redshift or BigQuery if you were on Google Cloud. Then the favorite language of any data scientist nowadays is Python to get things done and do. And then there is a whole suite of libraries and machine learning support to do things. The other one, but this is one where you're a bit of the front end. If we're lucky, if the customer is already ready to adopt it, it's where you get to Kubeflow and where you can really deploy your models in almost CI/CD kind of way and maintain them and retrain them automatically. That's more like in the continuity situation. So those are the typical kind of technologies. More and more, we see that software vendors and cloud suppliers offer APIs with pre-trained models. So unfortunately for AI and ML experts, those models are quite often pretty good. And we just need to tweak those models to get to our results rather than train a vision model ourselves, which is always a bit of a hard sell to somebody that is a great expert in model building. Now, its model tuning is less of a challenge, but it is, I think, and it will become more prevalent as much better translation, vision models, text analytic models are becoming available on the market.
Okay, thank you very much. What are the deliverables? If we are, for example, doing user interface prototyping, that there are, for example, Figma or Envision assets. If we are building, for example, software as a service, then we have, let's say, an application. What kind of deliverables are, let's say, provided through analytical work? Is this, let's say, like a written report? Is this like some sort of mechanism? If you could explain it to a total like.
Yeah, so there's a couple of, it depends a little bit where we are in the phase. So analytic strategy is a PowerPoint and maybe some Excel spreadsheet with some business case data behind it. And sometimes a description in Word or something of use cases. So that is the analytic strategy phase. If we get into the use cases, sometimes we use your mock-ups as well to show what you get, because if people can see it, it's so much more impactful. It could be Figma or a little while ago it was Envision kind of stuff. So this is what you get. If it works, it's still Hollywood. It doesn't work yet, but it looks like it's going to be. And those are the phases that you do not do any analytics yet, but you talk about it. And then the next phase, where we're going to realize it will be a database, it will be a AI model, or it will be a data science model in Python, a piece of code that we will deliver to the customer, which will be installed and people will be trained. So there will be training sessions, and those are the deliverables basically.
Okay, thank you for this. Seems like we're reaching my final question. In software development, handover, I think it's quite obvious thing, but how does it look like in your space? Do you, for example, provide maintenance? Do you, for example, have some, let's say, service level agreements? How the continuous work after the delivering the major part of your project looks like?
Most of the times we hand over to operational departments and we do not do any maintenance. However, sometimes such a specific knowledge is part of the model that we do. We are sort of second line backup when big problems arise, or when the special things with AI models is that even though, let's say, the code's still working fine, the predictions might be wrong. This could be because the data has changed, or it could be because the world has changed. They're like a lot of pricing predictions went wrong when Corona all of a sudden entered our societies, and nobody was buying cars, for instance, anymore. So the predictions for prices of second-hand cars, they weren't really good anymore because they weren't trained on this very, very extraordinary, extreme circumstances. So they had to be retrained. So typically in those kind of situations where there is a major change or where it needs to be checked and retrained, and sometimes it has been a handover to the operational department, but there's some organizations limited knowledge on AI or on how to maintain data science or programs. That's when we come in again to help do the retrain quickly and move on. We're typically not into business of keeping like a long-term support and maybe run services for companies. So we're Digital Sundai is much more where the change happens. So we drive the change, define the change, and then we try to hand over and make sure the customer can continue by themselves. And sometimes that requires a little support from us, but it's minimal.
Okay, thank you very much for this. I think we reached our last and final question. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would be interested in analytics, for example, of your shopping mall, please feel free to reach out to Robin. He and his team would be very, very happy to help you. Also, if you will have any further questions, today our audience is quite shy, I would say. But if some ideas or questions will pop up later on, please feel free to reach out to him. If you would be interested to building some, let's say, web applications or mobile applications related to the topics we've been discussing, feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues. Yeah. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Have a pleasant Thursday wherever you are. And thank you very much.
Thank you.